The rain hammered down on the windshield with such force that Maxwell Harrington could barely see the road ahead. The sleek Aston Martin, normally a symbol of his immense wealth and power, sputtered and jerked beneath him. With each flash of lightning, the CEO of Harrington Global Investments caught glimpses of the desolate country road he'd mistakenly chosen as a shortcut back to New York City. Now, as steam began to rise from under the hood, Maxwell realized his $380,000 vehicle was about to fail him completely. "Damn it!" he shouted, slamming his palm against the steering wheel as the car coughed one final time before going silent. Rain continued to pound the roofs as the vehicle rolled to a stop. Maxwell ran his fingers through his salt and pepper hair, the stress lines around his eyes deepening. At 52, he had built an empire worth billions, commanded boardrooms with a single glance, and closed deals that changed the landscape of international finance. Yet here he was, stranded on a back road in rural Connecticut during the worst storm of the season. He pulled out his phone. No signal, of course. The bitter irony wasn't lost on him. Just hours ago, he had walked away from the negotiation table after acquiring yet another tech startup, adding hundreds of millions to his portfolio. The young founders had looked devastated as he gutted their company's vision to fit his profit model. "That's business," he had told them coldly. "Nothing personal." Now, as water began to seep through a small crack in the driver's side window, Maxwell unbuckled his seatbelt and grabbed his Italian leather briefcase. He'd have to find help on foot. "My name is Theo Teller, and if this introduction has already sparked your curiosity, leave a like to follow the unfolding of this extraordinary journey. Have you ever found yourself completely helpless despite all your resources? Subscribe to the channel now and share in the comments the most unexpected way someone has helped you when you least expected it, just like our protagonist is about to experience. Also, let me know which city you're watching this story from. Each message and subscription gives me strength to bring more stories that will stir your emotions. Maxwell pushed open the car door against the force of the wind and stepped out into the downpour. His custom-made shoes immediately sank into mud, and his tailored suit was soaked through within seconds. Squinting through the rain, he spotted a faint light in the distance, perhaps a quarter-mile down the road. As he trudged forward, Maxwell thought about the board meetings scheduled for tomorrow morning. He had planned to announce another round of strategic workforce reductions, a euphemism for the mass layoffs that had become his signature move to boost quarterly profits. 3,000 employees were about to lose their livelihoods, but that wasn't his concern. The shareholders demanded continued growth, and Maxwell always delivered. The light grew closer, revealing a modest farmhouse set back from the road. A small garage stood to the side, its doors open, a warm glow emanating from within. Maxwell quickened his pace, his shoes squelching with each step. As he approached the garage, he could make out a small figure moving around inside, surrounded by tools and what appeared to be various mechanical parts. Maxwell cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he called out, his authoritative voice competing with the sound of the rain. "I need some assistance." The figure turned, and Maxwell was stunned to find himself face to face with a child, a boy no more than 8 years old, dressed in overalls several sizes too big, rolled up at the ankles and wrists. The boy's hands were smudged with grease, and a look of innocent curiosity filled his bright eyes as he took in the sight of the drenched, clearly expensive stranger standing at the entrance to his garage. "Are you okay, mister?" the boy asked, wiping his hands on a rag that hung from his pocket. His voice was surprisingly steady for a child, almost mature beyond his years. Maxwell ran a hand through his dripping hair, trying to maintain his composure. "My car broke down about a quarter-mile back. I need to use a phone to call for assistance." The boy nodded thoughtfully, as if processing a complex problem. "Mom's not home right now. She works night shifts at the hospital." He gestured toward a small stool. "You can sit if you want. You're making a puddle." Maxwell glanced down to see water pooling around his ruined Italian leather shoes. He hesitated, unaccustomed to taking directions from anyone, let alone a child. Nevertheless, he moved to the stool and sat down stiffly. "What kind of car do you have?" the boy asked, reaching for a red toolbox that looked almost as big as he was. "An Aston Martin DB11, Maxwell replied automatically, not expecting the child to recognize the luxury vehicle. The boy's eyes widened slightly. "V12 engine?" The 2023 model had some issues with the cooling system. Dad said they cut corners on the auxiliary pump. Maxwell stared at the child, momentarily speechless. "How do you know that?" A shadow passed over the boy's face. "My dad taught me about cars. He could fix anything." The past tense didn't escape Maxwell's notice. "I'm Billy, by the way, Billy Townsend." "Maxwell Harrington," he responded, offering his surname by habit, the way he did in business introductions. The boy nodded solemnly, as if the name meant nothing to him. A novel experience for Maxwell, whose name typically evoked immediate recognition and often trepidation in business circles. "I could take a look at your car," Billy offered, already gathering tools into a smaller box. "If it's just the cooling system, I might be able to fix it temporarily." Maxwell almost laughed. You're what, 7? 8.5, Billy corrected with a hint of indignation, "and I've been helping with cars since I was 5. He pulled on a yellow raincoat that hung from a hook on the wall. "Do you want help or not, Mr. Harrington?" There was something in the boy's tone, not impudence, but a simple confidence, that gave Maxwell pause. In the corporate world, he was accustomed to people scrambling to please him, motivated by fear or ambition. This child had neither. "Fine," Maxwell finally said, his options limited. "But be careful. That car costs more than—" He stopped himself, realizing how ridiculous it would sound to compare the vehicle's value to this modest home. Billy seemed unfazed. "I'll get the wagon for my tools. You can use that umbrella." He pointed to a large umbrella leaning against the wall. As they trudged back through the rain toward the stranded Aston Martin, Maxwell found himself holding the umbrella over the boy rather than himself, an uncharacteristically protective gesture. The child walked with purpose, pulling a red wagon filled with tools behind him, occasionally glancing up at Maxwell with curious eyes. "So what do you do, Mr. Harrington?" Billy asked as they walked. "I'd run a global investment firm," Maxwell replied curtly, not elaborating as he usually would, on the billions in assets his company managed or the powerful individuals who sought his counsel. "Is that like the stock market stuffs?" "Dad had stocks before he got sick. Mom had to sell them all for the hospital bills." The casual revelation was delivered without self-pity, merely a statement of fact. Maxwell felt an uncomfortable twinge. Just last month, his firm had acquired a healthcare network and immediately implemented efficiency measures that included reducing financial assistance programs for patients. It had increased profits by 18% in the first quarter. "Something like that," he muttered, relieved when they finally reached the car. Billy approached the Aston Martin with reverence, running his small hand along its sleek, wet surface. "She's beautiful," he whispered, then looked up at Maxwell. "Can you pop the hood?" The billionaire complied, watching with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity as the child propped open the hood and stood on his tiptoes to peer inside, his little face illuminated by the flashlight he'd brought. Billy examined the engine with a methodical precision that was uncanny for a child his age. His small fingers moved deftly from one component to another, his expression shifting from concentration to subtle recognition as he identified the problem. "It's the secondary cooling pump, just like I thought," he announced, pointing to a component nestled deep within the engine compartment. "And there's a split in one of the hoses. The vacuum pressure is all wrong now." He glanced up at Maxwell. "That's why it overheated so fast." Maxwell peered into the jumble of pipes and metal, seeing nothing but a complex maze. In boardrooms and on trading floors, he commanded absolute authority. Yet here, looking at the inner workings of a machine he drove daily, he was completely lost. This child, meanwhile, navigated it with the confidence of a seasoned mechanic. "Can you actually fix this?" Maxwell asked, unable to keep the doubt from his voice. Billy didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached deep into the engine, his small arms barely long enough to access the problematic area. I can make it work enough to get you to a proper garage, he finally said. But you'll need to order the original part. It's expensive. Money isn't an issue, Maxwell stated flatly. The boy glanced up at him, raindrops sliding down his face. Must be nice, he said simply, without malice or envy, before returning his attention to the engine. The comment landed like a slap. Maxwell was accustomed to flaunting his wealth, to using it as both shield and sword. But in the matter-of-fact observation of this child, his standard response felt hollow. As Billy worked, Maxwell held the umbrella awkwardly, trying to shield the boy from the worst of the downpour. The rain had eased somewhat, but the wind had picked up, sending cold gusts under the hood. The child's hands were turning red from the combination of cold metal and chilly air. "Don't you have gloves?" Maxwell asked. Billy shook his head. "Dad's are too big. Mom was going to get me my own for Christmas." He continued working, his fingers becoming increasingly stiff. Without thinking, Maxwell removed his cashmere scarf, a $2,000 accessory from his favorite Parisian boutique, and held it out. "Wrap this around your hands." Billy looked at the luxurious item doubtfully. "I'll get grease on it." "It doesn't matter," Maxwell said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. As the boy wrapped the scarf around his hands like makeshift mittens, Maxwell found himself studying the child's face. There was something oddly familiar in the set of his jaw, the shape of his eyes. Perhaps it was just that focused expression, the one Maxwell had seen countless times in mirrors before major presentations or negotiations. "So, Billy," Maxwell began, searching for small talk to fill the silence, "what does your mother do at the hospital?" "She's a nurse in the oncology ward," Billy replied, his attention still fixed on the engine. "That's where she met my dad. He was sick for a long time before he died." He said this with the directness of a child who hadn't yet learned to soften painful truths. "He taught me about cars from his hospital bed. We had all these manuals and diagrams. The doctors said it was good therapy." Maxwell nodded, unsure how to respond. Death was a topic he generally avoided despite, or perhaps because of, the fact that his corporate decisions often had life-altering consequences for thousands. He preferred to view people as numbers on a spreadsheet, their struggles conveniently abstracted. "What was your father's name?" he asked, the question emerging unbidden. Thomas Townsend." Billy looked up at Maxwell. "He worked for a big company in New York before he got sick. In finance, like you. He wore suits like yours too, but not as fancy." Maxwell felt a chill that had nothing to do with the rain. Thomas Townsend. The name struck a distant chord in his memory, but he couldn't quite place it. Had he known this boy's father? In a career spanning decades, he'd encountered thousands of employees and competitors. "Okay, I think I've got it," Billy announced, breaking into Maxwell's thoughts. He twisted something within the engine, then carefully repositioned a clamp on what appeared to be the split hose. "Try starting it now." Maxwell slid into the driver's seat, his mind still churning over the name Thomas Townsend. As he turned the key, the engine sputtered briefly, then roared to life with a healthy purr. The dashboard lights returned to normal, the warning indicators disappearing one by one. "You actually fixed it," Maxwell murmured, genuine amazement in his voice. He stepped back out into the rain to find Billy already closing the hood, a small, satisfied smile on his face. "You've got a temporary fix here," Billy explained as he gathered his tools, "but you should get it to a proper mechanic soon. The hose needs complete replacement." Maxwell nodded, a gesture of acknowledgement he rarely offered to others. "I'm impressed. Not many adults could have done what you just did, let alone a child." Billy shrugged, but Maxwell could see the pride flash briefly in his eyes. "Dad always said understanding how things work is the most important skill you can have." He hesitated, then added, "Even more important than being rich." The comment wasn't delivered with any intended slight, yet Maxwell felt its weight. In his world, understanding money, how to accumulate it, manipulate it, multiply it, was the only skill that truly mattered. Everything else could be purchased. "Your father sounds like a wise man," Maxwell said carefully. "How long has he been gone?" 2 years, 3 months, and 12 days, Billy replied, with the precision of someone who counted each passing day. He got really sick really fast. Mom says it was aggressive. The rain had dwindled to a drizzle now, and in the distance lightning flashed silently, the storm moving away. Maxwell glanced at his watch, an elegant Swiss timepiece worth more than most people's annual salary. It was getting late, and the thought of his empty penthouse apartment in Manhattan suddenly seemed less appealing than it had hours ago. "Let me drive you home," Maxwell offered, gesturing to the car. "It's the least I can do." Billy nodded and loaded his toolbox into the wagon. "I should leave a note for Mom. She worries." As they drove the short distance back to the modest farmhouse, Maxwell found himself studying the boy's profile in his peripheral vision. That nagging sense of familiarity persisted, growing stronger. There was something in the shape of the child's nose, the curve of his eyebrows, that stirred a distant memory. "Your mother," Maxwell began carefully. "What's her name?" "Sarah," Billy replied, his small hands resting on his lap. "Sarah Townsend." The name hit Maxwell like a physical blow. Sarah. Images flooded his mind. A young woman with warm eyes and a brilliant smile, working as an administrative assistant at Harrington Global's Manhattan office 15 years ago. Sarah, who had caught his eye during a particularly stressful acquisition period. Sarah, with whom he'd had a brief but intense affair before abruptly ending things when his then-wife had grown suspicious. Maxwell gripped the steering wheel tighter, his knuckles whitening. It couldn't be the same Sarah. It had to be a coincidence. "Mom's going to be surprised I fixed a car like this," Billy continued, oblivious to Maxwell's internal turmoil. "She always says I got my dad's brains for machines." They pulled up to the farmhouse, and Maxwell killed the engine, his mind racing. If this was the same Sarah he had known, and if Thomas Townsend had fallen ill around 9 years ago, the timing aligned with a possibility too staggering to contemplate. Stories like this remind us of the unexpected connections that link our lives in ways we could never predict. If you believe in these hidden threads of fate, consider subscribing to not miss what happens next. "Would you like to come in?" Billy asked, breaking into Maxwell's thoughts. "I can make hot chocolate. Mom taught me how. She says I make it better than she does." Maxwell hesitated. The sensible thing would be to thank the boy, perhaps offer him some money for his help, and continue on his way. That's what the Maxwell Harrington who had built a financial empire would do: calculate the transaction, settle the debt, and move on. "I'd like that," he heard himself say instead. The inside of the farmhouse was modest, but immaculately kept. Photographs lined the walls, many featuring Billy at various ages, alongside a woman Maxwell could now confirm was indeed the Sarah he had known. She looked older, more careworn than he remembered, but unmistakably the same person. In several photos, a man with Billy's eyes and jawline stood with his arm around Sarah. Thomas Townsend. Maxwell studied these images with growing unease, noticing how the man appeared increasingly gaunt in the more recent pictures, the illness clearly taking its toll. Billy bustled about the kitchen with surprising competence, heating milk on the stove and measuring cocoa powder with careful precision. Maxwell stood awkwardly in the living room, feeling out of place among the well-worn furniture and handmade decorations, a stark contrast to his own sterile, professionally designed Manhattan penthouse. A framed certificate on the wall caught his attention. It was a recognition of service from Harrington Global Investments, dated 12 years ago, awarded to Thomas Townsend for 5 years of exemplary contribution to the Finance Analytics Department. Maxwell's breath caught in his throat. Thomas Townsend hadn't just worked in finance, he had worked for Maxwell's company. The pieces were falling into place with terrifying clarity. "Your father," Maxwell said carefully as Billy returned with 2 steaming mugs. "He worked at Harrington Global?" Billy nodded, handing Maxwell a chipped mug adorned with the words, "World's Best Dad," in faded letters. That was his favorite jog. He had to quit when he got sick, though. The boy climbed onto a chair at the kitchen table, his feet dangling above the floor. The insurance wouldn't cover his treatments after that. Maxwell took a seat across from him, his mind frantically searching through memories. Thomas Townsend. Now he remembered, a brilliant analyst with an exceptional mind for patterns and predictions. Maxwell had never interacted with him directly. Employees at that level were several management layers removed from the CEO. But he did recall signing off on a major corporate insurance policy change around that time, a cost-cutting measure that had saved the company millions by reducing coverage for certain catastrophic illnesses. "Do you remember much about your dad?" Maxwell asked, the question emerging more softly than his usual commanding tone. Billy blew on his hot chocolate before answering. "Some things. He taught me about cars and math. He could do really big calculations in his head." The boy smiled faintly. "And he made funny pancakes on Sundays. They looked like animals." Maxwell nodded, taking a sip from his mug. The hot chocolate was indeed excellent, rich and not too sweet. "And what about—" He hesitated, uncertain how to phrase the question. "What about your birth? Does your mother talk about that time?" Something flickered across Billy's face, a brief shadow that suggested this might be a sensitive topic. "I know I was a surprise," he said eventually. "Mom says I wasn't planned, but I was definitely wanted." He traced his finger around the rim of his mug. "Dad wasn't my biological father. Mom told me that when I was 6. She said he chose to be my dad, which is more important than biology." The confirmation landed like a physical blow. Maxwell set his mug down carefully, afraid his shaking hands might drop it. Not his biological father. The implications were overwhelming. "Do you know who your biological father is?" Maxwell asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Billy shook his head. "Mom just says he was someone she knew before Dad, and that he wasn't ready to be a father." He shrugged with the resilience of childhood. "It doesn't really matter. Dad was my real dad." Maxwell stared at the boy, at the shape of his nose, the high forehead, the determined set of his jaw. Features that, now that he was looking for them, mirrored his own with uncanny precision. Features that he saw each morning in the mirror. His mind raced back to that period, 15 years ago, the brief but intense affair with Sarah, his administrative assistant, the abrupt way he had ended things when his then-wife had grown suspicious, the substantial severance package he'd arranged for Sarah's voluntary resignation, complete with a confidentiality agreement that prevented her from contacting him for any reason. He had never once considered the possibility of a child. A key turned in the front door lock, and Maxwell's heart rate spiked. Billy jumped up from his chair, excitement evident on his face. "Mom's home early," he exclaimed. The door swung open, and there she was, Sarah Townsend, 15 years older than when Maxwell had last seen her. She wore blue hospital scrubs, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, exhaustion evident in the lines around her eyes. Those eyes widened in shock as they landed on Maxwell sitting at her kitchen table. "Maxwell," she whispered, the color draining from her face. In that moment, as recognition and disbelief flooded her expression, Maxwell knew with absolute certainty that his suspicions were correct. Billy was his son. The silence that descended upon the kitchen was deafening. Billy glanced between the two adults, confusion evident on his young face as he sensed the sudden tension. "Mom, do you know Mr. Harrington?" he asked innocently. Sarah's hands were trembling as she set her purse down on the counter. Her eyes never left Maxwell's face, a kaleidoscope of emotions playing across her features: shock, anger, fear, and something deeper that Maxwell couldn't quite identify. "Billy," she said finally, her voice remarkably steady despite her evident distress, "would you please go up to your room for a little while? I need to speak with Mr. Harrington privately." The boy looked disappointed. "But Mom, he has an Aston Martin DB11. It broke down in the rain and I fixed the cooling system. Can't I stay?" Sarah managed a strained smile. "That's wonderful, sweetie. But this is grown-up talk. Please?" Billy sighed dramatically, the way only children can. "Fine, but can I show him my car models after?" "We'll see," Sarah replied non-committally. "Homework first." With a reluctant nod, Billy gathered his mug and headed upstairs, casting curious glances over his shoulder until he disappeared from view. The moment they heard his bedroom door close, Sarah's composed facade crumbled. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, keeping her voice low enough not to carry upstairs. "After 15 years, you just show up at my house? How did you even find us?" Maxwell raised his hands in a placating gesture. "I didn't. It was genuinely a coincidence. My car broke down and I was looking for help." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "Sarah, I had no idea about the boy." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "His name is Billy. William Thomas Townsend." She emphasized each name as if they were shields she could place between her son and the man sitting at her table. "And of course you had no idea. That was by design, wasn't it? The severance package, the non-disclosure agreement, the threat of legal action if I ever contacted you." Her bitter laugh held no humor. "You made it very clear you wanted no loose ends from our indiscretion." The clinical term stung more than Maxwell expected. He had compartmentalized that period of his life so completely that he'd almost convinced himself it had never happened. "I need to know," he said, his voice unusually tentative. "Is he mine?" Sarah stared at him for a long moment, then sank into a chair across from him. "Biologically? Yes. In every way that actually matters? No. Thomas was his father. Thomas was there for his first steps, his first words, his nightmares and his triumphs. Thomas loved him unconditionally." The confirmation, even though Maxwell had already deduced the truth, hit him with physical force. He had a son, a brilliant, resourceful, compassionate boy who had grown up without ever knowing him. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, aware of how self-centered the question sounded even as it left his lips. Sarah's eyes widened in disbelief. "Tell you? Maxwell, you made it abundantly clear that I was a complication you needed to eliminate from your lives. You were married. You were focused on building your empire. Your exact words were, 'I don't have room for distractions.'" She shook her head. "When I found out I was pregnant, I already knew where I stood with you." Maxwell remembered the words, remembered delivering them with cold efficiency in his corner office, Sarah sitting across from him, eyes downcast as HR outlined the terms of her departure. He had been ruthless, calculated, the same qualities that had made him a billionaire. "And Thomas?" he asked. "He knew." "Yes," Sarah said, a softness entering her voice. "I told him everything before we got serious. He said it didn't matter to him whose DNA Billy carried. He chose to be his father." Her gaze hardened as she looked at Maxwell. "Unlike you, who chose your reputation and your shareholders." The accusation was a direct hit, all the more devastating for its accuracy. Maxwell had always prided himself on making the logical choice, the profitable choice. Human collateral damage was an unfortunate but necessary aspect of business. Yet sitting here in this modest kitchen, confronted with the human consequence of his coldest calculation, logic offered no comfort. "The insurance," he said suddenly, pieces clicking into place. "Thomas worked for Harrington Global when he got sick." Sarah nodded grimly. "Your company's policy change classified his cancer as a pre-existing condition. After he'd been working there for 7 years, we lost coverage for the experimental treatments that might have saved him." Her hands clenched into fists on the table. "The irony wasn't lost on me. The company owned by the man who fathered my child refused to cover the treatments needed by the man who raised him. Maxwell felt physically ill. The policy change. He remembered signing off on it, remembered the projected savings of $24.7 million annually. A footnote in a quarterly report celebrated in the boardroom as strategic cost management. He'd never considered the human cost of that signature. I didn't know, he said weakly. That's the problem with men like you, Maxwell, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the tears gathering in her eyes. You never do. From upstairs came the faint sound of Billy moving around in his room, a reminder of the innocent life at the center of this complicated history. Maxwell stared into his now cold hot chocolate, the gravity of the situation pressing down on him with crushing force. I'd like to get to know him, he said finally, the words surprising even himself. Sarah's expression hardened. Absolutely not. Billy has been through enough losing Thomas. I won't let you waltz in, disrupt his life, and then disappear when it becomes inconvenient. She stood up abruptly, carrying her mug to the sink. Your car is fixed. I think it's time for you to go. Maxwell remained seated, his usual commanding presence diminished in this humble kitchen. Sarah, please, I understand your anger. You don't understand anything, she cut in, her back still turned to him. Do you know what Billy asked me last Christmas? He asked if his real dad knew about him and chose not to be here, or if he just didn't know he existed. Her voice cracked slightly. He said he hoped it was the second option because the first one hurt too much to think about. The words landed like physical blows. Maxwell had faced hostile takeovers, market crashes, and federal investigations without flinching, but this, the simple pain of a child wondering if he had been rejected, cut through all his defenses. I can help, Maxwell offered, falling back on the one tool he'd always relied on. Financially, I mean. College funds, health care, whatever you need. Sarah turned to face him, disappointment evident in her expression. After all these years, that's still your answer to everything? Money? She shook her head. We don't need your money, Maxwell. Thomas left us well provided for with his life insurance, and I make enough as a nurse. Before Maxwell could respond, the sound of footsteps on the stairs announced Billy's return. He appeared in the doorway, clutching a shoebox. Mom, can I please show Mr. Harrington my collection now? I finished my math homework. His eager expression fell as he registered the tension in the room. Is everything okay? Sarah forced a smile. Everything's fine, sweetie, but Mr. Harrington needs to get going. His car is fixed, and I'm sure he has important business in the city. Billy's disappointment was palpable. Oh, he said quietly, looking down at his shoebox. I just wanted to show him my special cars, the ones Dad and I built together. Maxwell felt something twist in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation he gradually recognized as genuine emotion breaking through years of calculated detachment. The boy, his son, wanted to share something important with him, never knowing the true connection between them. I think I can stay a bit longer, Maxwell said, looking at Sarah with a silent plea in his eyes. She hesitated, clearly torn between protecting her son from potential hurt and allowing him this moment of happiness. Finally, with obvious reluctance, she nodded. Just for a little while, then Mr. Harrington really does need to get back to the city. Billy's face lit up as he rushed to the table, carefully setting down his shoebox and removing the lid with reverent hands. Inside were a dozen model cars, each meticulously assembled and painted. Dad and I built these when he was in the hospital, Billy explained, gently lifting out a perfect miniature of a 1967 Shelby Mustang. This was the last one we finished before he trailed off, then straightened his shoulders and continued, before he got too sick to hold the small pieces. Maxwell examined the model, genuinely impressed by the craftsmanship. The detail was extraordinary, from the perfectly applied paint to the tiny dashboard instruments visible through the windows. "These are remarkable," he said honestly. "You have quite a talent." Billy beamed at the compliment, then grew serious. "Dad said working with your hands teaches you patience and attention to detail. He said those things matter more than being in a hurry to get results." The simple wisdom struck Maxwell deeply. Throughout his career, he had prioritized speed and results above all else, quarterly profits over sustainable growth, quick fixes over lasting solutions. How different might his life have been if he had understood the value of patience? As Billy continued showing his collection, Maxwell noticed a photograph tucked into the lid of the box. Billy and Thomas in a hospital room, working together on one of the models, both smiling despite the medical equipment surrounding them. "He doesn't look like you," Sarah said quietly, having moved to stand beside Maxwell. Her voice was pitched low enough that Billy, absorbed in explaining the details of a vintage Corvette, couldn't hear. Everyone always said how much Billy resembled Thomas. No one ever questioned it. Maxwell nodded, studying the photograph. There was indeed a resemblance between Billy and his adoptive father, not in their physical features, but in their expressions, the way they held their heads, the focus in their eyes. Thomas had given Billy more than his name. He'd given him parts of himself. "He was a better man than me," Maxwell acknowledged, the words catching in his throat. Sarah's expression softened slightly at his unexpected humility. "He was the best man I've ever known," she agreed. Billy looked up, catching the tail end of their exchange. "Are you talking about my dad?" he asked. "Mom says he was her hero." "Mine too," Maxwell heard himself say, though he'd never met Thomas Townsend in life. But the man who had raised his biological son with love, who had taught him values and skills that Maxwell himself lacked. That man was indeed heroic, in ways Maxwell was only beginning to understand. Billy smiled, pleased by this confirmation of his father's importance. "Want to see my favorite?" he asked, lifting the final model from the box, an Aston Martin, almost identical to the one parked outside. The Aston Martin model gleamed under the kitchen lights, its silver paint job immaculate, every detail rendered with astonishing precision. Maxwell took it carefully when Billy offered it to him, turning it over in his hands with genuine appreciation. "This is extraordinary," he said, noting the perfect miniature replica of the leather interior. "Your father taught you well." "Dad said this would be my car someday," Billy explained, his voice dropping to a near whisper as if sharing a sacred secret. "Not a real one, of course, but he said if I kept learning and working hard with my hands and my mind, I'd be able to afford any car I wanted when I grew up." The boy's eyes took on a faraway look. "He said dreams need both hard work and patience." Maxwell swallowed hard, struck by the profound simplicity of the advice. Throughout his career, he had encountered countless Ivy League MBAs and Wall Street analysts spouting complex theories and strategies, yet none had distilled success so elegantly as this man who had worked in his company's middle management. A sudden buzzing interrupted the moment, Maxwell's phone finally receiving service again. He glanced at the screen to see dozens of missed calls and messages, primarily from his COO and legal team, all urgently requesting his approval for tomorrow's layoff announcement and strategy. The buzzing continued, insistent and demanding. Just hours ago, these messages would have been his highest priority, the corporate machinery requiring his immediate attention. Now, they seemed distant and somehow trivial compared to the human reality before him. "You should get that," Sarah said, her expression unreadable. "It sounds important." Maxwell silenced the phone without looking at it again. "It can wait." Billy carefully returned his cherished models to their shoebox, handling each one with reverence before securing the lid. Mom says I should go to bed now. I have school tomorrow. He hesitated, then asked, Will you come back sometime, Mr. Harrington? I could show you how to build one of these models. The innocent invitation pierced Maxwell more deeply than any boardroom confrontation ever had. He glanced at Sarah, unsure how to respond. Her expression was complex, protective, wary, yet softened by her son's evident happiness. It's getting late, Billy. Mr. Harrington needs to get back to New York. Actually, Maxwell said, making a split-second decision that felt nothing like his usual calculated moves. I need to cancel my morning meetings anyway. If it's all right, I'd like to drive Billy to school tomorrow. He looked directly at Sarah, and perhaps we could talk more afterward. The tension in the room was palpable, as Sarah visibly struggled with the request. Billy looked between them, sensing the undercurrents, but not understanding their source. Please, Mom, he asked. None of my friends will believe I fixed an Aston Martin unless they see it. After what seemed like an eternity, Sarah nodded reluctantly. Just this once, she stipulated, her eyes warning Maxwell not to read too much into her concession. Now, teeth brushed and bed, young man. Billy's face lit up. He carefully placed his shoebox on a shelf, then surprised Maxwell by giving him a quick, impulsive hug. Good night, Mr. Harrington. See you in the morning. Before Maxwell could respond, the boy darted up the stairs, his footsteps thundering with childish enthusiasm. Left alone with Sarah, Maxwell felt an unfamiliar vulnerability. The hug had caught him completely off guard. When was the last time anyone had embraced him with such unguarded sincerity? His ex-wives had kissed him with calculated affection. Business associates shook his hand with respectful distance. But this simple, spontaneous gesture from a child, his child, had shattered something in his carefully constructed emotional armor. I'll pick him up at 7:30, he said, standing to leave. Unless that's too early, 7:45 would be better, Sarah replied, walking him to the door. He's not great with mornings. Maxwell nodded, filing away this small detail about his son with unexpected eagerness. At the threshold he paused, searching for the right words. In business, he never struggled for language. Commands, negotiations, and ultimatums flowed from him with practiced ease. But here, in this context where money and power held no sway, he found himself uncharacteristically hesitant. Sarah, he finally said, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but thank you for this chance. She studied him in the porch light, her expression guarded. This isn't for you, Maxwell, it's for Billy. He's fascinated by that car and the man who drives it. That's all this is. She crossed her arms, a protective gesture. Don't mistake my allowing this for forgiveness or an invitation back into our lives. I understand, he replied. And he did. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, Maxwell Harrington fully understood that he was not entitled to whatever he wanted simply because he could afford it. He walked to his car, the night air cool and clean after the rain. As he slid into the driver's seat, his phone buzzed again with urgent messages. Tomorrow was supposed to be the announcement of the layoffs, 3,000 employees whose lives would be irrevocably changed by his decision. Just as Thomas Townsend's life had been altered by a policy change, Maxwell had approved without a second thought. Maxwell stared at the modest farmhouse, where a light had just gone out in what he presumed was Billy's room. His son was going to sleep, unaware that his biological father sat just yards away, confronting the consequences of a lifetime of coldly rational decisions. With sudden clarity, Maxwell knew what he had to do. He started the engine, but instead of heading toward New York, he pulled over just down the road and began to make calls. His first was to his COO. Cancel the layoffs, he said, without preamble when the man answered. All of them. What? Came the incredulous response. Maxwell, we've been planning this for months. The board is expecting. The board answers to me, not the other way around. Maxwell cut in, his voice regaining some of its characteristic authority. "I want a new proposal on my desk by the end of the week, one that doesn't involve a single job loss. But the quarterly projections will take a hit, and so will our stock price temporarily. I can live with that." Maxwell thought of Thomas Townsend, of Sarah, of Billy. There are more important things than quarterly returns. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed away the humidity and left behind a crisp, clean air that felt like possibility. Maxwell arrived at the farmhouse at precisely 7:43 a.m., having spent a sleepless night at a nearby hotel. He had shaved carefully and changed into the spare shirt he kept in his briefcase, but he still felt rumpled and out of place as he knocked on the door. Billy answered immediately, backpack already on, practically vibrating with excitement. "Mr. Harrington, you came back." The simple joy in the boy's voice struck Maxwell deeply. When was the last time anyone had been genuinely happy to see him, rather than nervous, intimidated, or calculating what they might gain from his presence? "I promised I would," Maxwell replied, the concept of keeping one's word for reasons beyond contractual obligation feeling strangely novel. Sarah appeared behind Billy, dressed in her nurse's scrubs, hair damp from a recent shower. The dark circles under her eyes suggested she'd slept as poorly as Maxwell had. "Good morning," she said with cautious formality. "Billy's lunch is in his backpack. School lets out at 3:15, but I'll be picking him up today. I have the afternoon shift." Maxwell nodded, understanding the implicit boundary she was establishing. This was a one-time concession, not an ongoing arrangement. "Can we go now?" Billy urged, already heading for the Aston Martin. "I told everyone at school you'd be bringing me." Sarah caught Maxwell's arm as he turned to follow. "This means everything to him," she said quietly. "Don't make me regret it." "I won't," Maxwell promised, and he meant it more sincerely than any deal he'd ever negotiated. The drive to Billy's elementary school was filled with the boy's excited chatter. He asked dozens of questions about the car, its horsepower, top speed, how the transmission worked. Maxwell answered what he could, somewhat embarrassed to realize how little he knew about the machine he drove daily. Billy clearly understood far more about the engineering than he did. "So, what do you do all day?" Billy asked suddenly, switching conversational tracks with the natural agility of children. "Mom says CEOs just sit in big chairs and tell people what to do." Maxwell chuckled despite himself. "There's a bit more to it than that, though sometimes not much. Mostly I make decisions about how the company should spend its money and grow its business." It was a simplification, but explaining hostile takeovers and leveraged buyouts seemed inappropriate. "Do you like it?" Billy asked, his innocently direct question cutting to the heart of something Maxwell rarely considered. Did he like it? Maxwell had pursued wealth and power with single-minded determination for so long that the question of enjoyment had become irrelevant. Success was its own justification. "I'm good at it," he answered carefully. Billy nodded sagely. "Dad said that's not the same thing. He said doing what you're good at makes you successful, but doing what you love makes you happy." The boy looked out the window thoughtfully. He was good at finance stuff, but he loved working with his hands. "That's why we built models together." Maxwell absorbed this unexpected wisdom from beyond the grave. Another message from Thomas Townsend, the man who had raised his biological son with principles Maxwell had never bothered to cultivate. They arrived at the elementary school to find a small crowd of children already gathered at the curb, clearly awaiting their arrival. Billy's status instantly skyrocketed as the Aston Martin pulled up, drawing gasps and wide eyes from his classmates. "Remember," Billy said seriously as Maxwell stopped the car, "you promised to rev the engine before you drive away." Maxwell nodded solemnly, treating this request with the same gravity he would give to a major business commitment. "I remember." As Billy climbed out, several children immediately surrounded him. peppering him with questions about the car and the man driving it. Maxwell watched through the window as Billy responded with confident expertise, occasionally pointing back toward various features of the vehicle. A tap on the passenger window drew Maxwell's attention. A woman who appeared to be a teacher was gesturing for him to roll down the window. "Good morning," she said when he complied. "I'm Ms. Peterson, Billy's teacher. Are you a relative? We haven't seen you at pickup before." Before Maxwell could formulate a response, Billy was at her side. "This is Mr. Harrington, Ms. Peterson. His car broke down in the storm yesterday, and I fixed it for him. Tell her how I fixed it, Mr. Harrington." Maxwell found himself recounting the previous evening's events, emphasizing Billy's remarkable mechanical aptitude. Ms. Peterson listened with growing interest. "That doesn't surprise me at all," she said warmly. "Billy has an extraordinary mind for mechanical concepts. He's actually helping me teach our science unit on simple machines." She looked at the boy with evident fondness. "He's quite special." Pride welled up in Maxwell's chest, an emotion so unfamiliar in this context that it took him a moment to identify it. This was his son being praised, his son's talents being recognized. The feeling was entirely different from the satisfaction he derived from corporate accolades or financial victories. "Yes," he agreed, looking at Billy with new eyes. "He certainly is." The school bell rang, and Billy's classmates began reluctantly moving toward the building. "I have to go," Billy said, suddenly looking shy. Will you come back sometime?" The question hung in the air, weighted with implications neither of them fully understood. In Billy's eyes, Maxwell was just a stranger with a cool car who had appeared during a storm. He had no idea he was asking his biological father if he would remain in his life. "I'd like that very much," Maxwell answered, his voice rough with emotion. "If your mother agrees." Billy nodded, seemingly satisfied with this conditional response. "Don't forget to rev the engine," he called as he joined his classmates. True to his promise, Maxwell revved the powerful motor as he pulled away, triggering delighted squeals from the watching children. In his rearview mirror, he could see Billy standing taller, basking in the reflected glory. As he drove away, Maxwell realized he was heading toward Sarah's house rather than back to New York. The important board meeting he'd been scheduled to lead was starting in 20 minutes, but somehow, the corporate maneuverings that had dominated his life for decades seemed distant and hollow compared to what he had experienced in the last 18 hours. He pulled over and called his executive assistant. "Cancel all my meetings for today," he instructed, "and have the legal department prepare documents related to insurance policy revisions. I want comprehensive coverage reinstated for all employees, effective immediately, regardless of any pre-existing conditions." "Sir?" His assistant sounded bewildered. "That will increase our operational costs by millions." "I'm aware," Maxwell replied, thinking of Thomas Townsend's hospital bed, of the models he had built with Billy while fighting a disease that proper insurance might have helped combat. "It's long overdue." 6 months later, Maxwell Harrington stood on the sidelines of a little league baseball field, watching as Billy stepped up to bat. The boy adjusted his helmet, took a practice swing, and then settled into his stance with the focused determination that Maxwell had come to recognize and admire. "He's got a good eye," remarked the man standing beside him. Robert, another parent whom Maxwell had gotten to know during these Saturday morning games. Maxwell nodded, unable to suppress the smile that came so much more easily these days. "He practices every day after school. Says he's going to make the all-star team next year." The crack of bat-meeting ball punctuated their conversation as Billy connected with a pitch, sending it sailing over the infield. The boy dropped the bat and raced toward first base, his face alight with joy as the crowd of parents cheered. "Go, Billy!" Sarah's voice rose above the others as she jumped up from her seat in the bleachers, clapping enthusiastically. The past 6 months had been a careful dance of boundaries and gradual trust building. After that first morning at Billy's school, Maxwell had returned to the farmhouse with a proposition for Sarah, not a financial arrangement as he might once have suggested, but a simple request to be allowed into Billy's life in whatever capacity she deemed appropriate. The negotiations had been more delicate and meaningful than any corporate deal he'd ever struck. Sarah had been understandably cautious, setting clear parameters. Maxwell could attend Billy's baseball games and school events. He could visit on Saturday afternoons for model building sessions that had become their shared ritual, but there would be no mention of his biological connection to Billy. Not yet. Not until Sarah decided the time was right. Maxwell had agreed to all her terms without hesitation, grateful for any opportunity to know his son. The truth about their relationship remained a secret between him and Sarah, though he suspected Billy sometimes wondered about the successful businessman who had suddenly taken such an interest in his life. On the field, Billy had rounded second base and was charging toward third, his coach frantically waving him on as the outfielder struggled to retrieve the ball. "He's going for it," Robert exclaimed, gripping Maxwell's shoulder in shared excitement. Billy slid into home plate seconds before the ball reached the catcher's mitt. As dust settled around him, the umpire's arms spread wide in the unmistakable signal, "safe." The small crowd erupted in cheers, none louder than Maxwell's. This simple, perfect moment of a child's triumph filled him with a pride unlike anything he'd experienced in boardrooms or on trading floors. Later, as families gathered for post-game ice cream, Billy bounded over, still in his dusty uniform, his face flushed with victory and chocolate ice cream. "Did you see that, Mr. Harrington? Coach says it was an in-the-park home run." Maxwell nodded, resisting the urge to ruffle the boy's hair, a gesture that still felt presumptuous despite their growing bond. "I saw it. That was some impressive running, Billy." Sarah approached, carrying her purse and a folding chair. The months had softened her attitude toward Maxwell, though wariness still shadowed her eyes at times. "Ready to go, slugger?" she asked, smiling at her son. "We've got that model waiting at home." Billy's eyes lit up. "The 1955 Mercedes 300 SL. Mr. Harrington, are you still coming over to help with the gull-wing doors? They're really complicated." "I wouldn't miss it," Maxwell assured him. And he meant it. No urgent call from his office, no market crisis would pull him away from these precious hours. His company had undergone dramatic changes in the past 6 months. The cancelled layoffs had been just the beginning. Maxwell had instituted comprehensive healthcare reforms, generous family leave policies, and educational assistance programs, all funded by a significant reduction in executive compensation, beginning with his own. The financial press had called him everything from erratic to revolutionary. His board had nearly revolted until the unexpected results began to materialize. Employee productivity soared, talent retention strengthened, and the company culture transformed. The short-term hit to profits had given way to a more sustainable growth model that industry analysts were now scrambling to understand and replicate. None of that mattered as much as the small hand that unexpectedly slipped into his as they walked toward the parking lot. "Can I ride with Mr. Harrington, Mom?" Billy asked. "He promised to tell me about the time he drove on the Autobahn in Germany." Sarah hesitated only briefly before nodding. "I'll meet you both at home." As Maxwell helped Billy buckle into the passenger seat of the Aston Martin, now religiously maintained thanks to Billy's meticulous inspection schedule, he marveled at how completely his priorities had shifted. The man who once measured his worth in billions now found his richest moments in a child's smile. A Saturday afternoon spent assembling tiny car parts, a spontaneous high five after a successfully completed model. "Mr. Harrington?" Billy asked as they drove, the serious tone in his voice catching Maxwell's attention. "Yes, Billy. I've been thinking about something." The boy fiddled with his seatbelt, uncharacteristically hesitant. My birthday's coming up next month. Maxwell nodded. He was well aware, having already arranged for a special surprise with Sarah's cautious blessing. I was wondering, Billy continued, would it be okay if I called you Max instead of Mr. Harrington? Mom says it's more polite to use last names with adults, but Mr. Harrington sounds so formal, and you're at our house all the time now, so... Maxwell gripped the steering wheel tighter, emotion threatening to overwhelm him at this simple request. I would be honored, Billy. The boy smiled, relieved. Good, because I already told my friends at school that you're my friend Max, who knows all about business and helps me with my models. Friend? The word held such simple beauty, such honest connection. Maxwell had acquired many titles throughout his career, CEO, chairman, billionaire, but none had ever felt as meaningful as this one, freely given by his son. That evening, as the three of them sat around the kitchen table, putting the finishing touches on the Mercedes model, Sarah caught Maxwell's eye over Billy's bent head. Something in her expression had changed, a softening, a decision reached. Billy, she said gently, there's something Max and I need to talk to you about, something important. The boy looked up, his fingers still holding a tiny chrome bumper. Am I in trouble? No, sweetheart, Sarah assured him. It's about family, about your father, and about Max. As Billy's eyes moved between them, questioning but trusting, Maxwell felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for this second chance he'd never sought, but had somehow been granted. Whatever challenges lay ahead in explaining their complicated history to this remarkable child, he knew that the greatest investment of his life had nothing to do with stocks or assets or corporate empires. It was here, in this modest farmhouse, with this extraordinary boy who had taught a billionaire the true meaning of value. I've reached the end of this story, but I want it to continue through you. If this narrative touched your heart or made you reflect on your own choices, become part of our storytelling community. Hit the subscribe button. This small gesture means so much to me. Share in the comments which moment of this journey resonated most with you, and if you've ever experienced something similar in your own lives. Your stories are the true treasure of this channel, and that's why we continue here, week after week, sharing these narratives that remind us of what truly matters. Until the next story, which I promise will be as special as you who've stayed with me until the end.